All right, today we are jumping headfirst into a document that is, well, it's one of the most ambitious things I think I've ever read. It's called the Scientific Indictment, and believe me, it tries to connect everything: consciousness, human history, and what it calls a hidden war. The claims it makes are, to put it mildly, absolutely extraordinary.
Right from the get-go, this document just throws down the gauntlet. I mean, listen to that. It flat out says this is not a conspiracy theory, but then immediately says it's documenting a real one. So it's really setting the stage for a story that wants to completely flip our understanding of reality on its head.
So how in the world do you even start to unpack something this massive? Well, we're going to follow the structure of the indictment itself. We'll kick PIMS off with its core idea, this so-called Gnostic War, and then we'll look at the alleged strategy they used for control. After that, we'll dig into the specific case files it presents as evidence in finance, medicine, and culture.
Okay, first things first, we have to wrap our heads around this central thesis. This is the absolute bedrock of the entire argument. Everything else we're going to talk about is built on this one pretty radical idea. So, according to this document, human history isn't what we've been taught. It's not a story of progress or just a series of random events. It's a covert war. The source claims that these parasitic, non-human entities it calls Archons have been manipulating all of us for millennia. And their goal? To keep us spiritually asleep, totally disconnected from our true potential, which makes us way easier to control. This is the lens, okay? Everything else in the document has to be viewed through this lens. So you might be asking, how does some ancient hidden force actually control things in our modern world? Well, the document argues these Archons don't get their hands dirty. Instead, they use human agents and institutions. And it alleges that in the 20th century, they rolled out this incredibly sophisticated two-pronged attack for mass psychological control.
And this is what the source calls the Pincer Movement. Think of it like this. On one side, you've got the software, the Frankfurt School. The claim is they were tasked with cooking up ideologies like critical theory, basically designed to dissolve the bonds of Western culture from the inside out. Then, on the other side, you have the hardware, the Tavistock Institute. The source says this is where they perfected the science of mass brainwashing and social engineering. So one group to tear down the old world and another to build a new one in its place.
And here's the piece that supposedly ties it all together. The indictment says there was one entity acting as the prime contractor for both sides of this pincer movement. Citing Foundation annual reports as its proof, the document claims the Rockefeller Foundation not only rescued the Frankfurt School when they fled Nazi Germany and set them up at Columbia University, but it also provided the huge, crucial grant to officially establish the Tavistock Institute right after the war. Now, this brings us to the first major case file in this indictment, our modern financial system. The source doesn't see this as some natural evolution of banking. Oh no. It sees it as a meticulously planned out coup. The document points us to this super secret meeting on Jekyll Island back in 1910. And just look at the list of people who were there. It's a literal who's who of the power elite. We've got Senator Nelson Aldrich, who just happened to be John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s father-in-law. You've got direct representatives from the Rockefeller and Morgan banking empires, and even a guy from the European Rothschild dynasty. The claim here is that this tiny group of men secretly cooked up a private banking cartel and then brilliantly disguised it as a government agency. And here's where the source presents what it considers the smoking gun. So November 1910, you have the secret meeting. Then, just 18 months later, the Titanic sinks. The document alleges this was no accident at all. It claims that the three most powerful, most outspoken opponents of this new central bank idea, John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus, all went down with the ship. It literally frames their deaths as a coordinated political hit that cleared the runway for the Federal Reserve Act to pass just a year later. Next up, the indictment shifts its focus from our wallets to our bodies. It claims that the very same forces that grabbed control of the financial system also engineered a complete takeover of the entire medical field. The main piece of evidence here is something called the Flexner Report from 1910. Officially, we're taught it was a good thing. It standardized medicine, got rid of all the quackery. But the indictment reframes it as a corporate-funded coup. It argues this report, paid for by the Rockefeller and Carnegie Foundations, was actually a weapon used to systematically shut down and outlaw all the competition, things like homeopathy, natural remedies, herbalism. Why? To create a total monopoly for the patent-based chemical drug industry, an industry they just so happened to be heavily invested in. All right, this final case file is the biggest one yet. It moves past money and medicine and into the very fabric of our society. It argues that 20th century culture wasn't an accident. It was deliberately engineered to weaken us, to break our social bonds, and make us all easier to control.
And this is where the document makes some of its most explosive claims. It alleges that the Rockefeller Foundation funded key parts of second-wave feminism and those infamous Kinsey reports. But it argues the goal wasn't actually liberation. It was to destabilize society. According to this theory, these movements were weaponized to get women into the workforce, which, by the way, doubled the tax base for the Fed, while also chipping away at traditional morality, something the source sees as a pillar of social stability.
This line of thinking goes all the way to the 1960s counterculture. We think of the Laurel Canyon music scene, the Doors, the Byrds, as this spontaneous, grassroots rebellion. Well, the indictment offers a completely wild counter-narrative, that it was a carefully managed psyop, a psychological operation designed to hijack and control the real anti-war movement from the inside.
And for evidence, even if it's circumstantial, the document shows us this table. It points out that a really strange number of the scene's biggest icons, Jim Morrison, Frank Zappa, David Crosby, Stephen Stills, were the children of very high-ranking military and intelligence officers. The source just kind of leaves it there, asking, are these really the family backgrounds you'd expect from the leaders of a genuine anti-establishment rebellion?
So let's wrap this all up. What the Scientific Indictment really does is take all these things that seem totally separate, events in finance, medicine, and culture, and it weaves them together into one single, gigantic, and, frankly, pretty chilling story. And this is it, the final verdict of the indictment, that the creation of the Federal Reserve, the takeover of medicine, and the massive social upheavals of the 20th century, none of it was an accident. It claims they were all deliberate, coordinated moves in a secret Gnostic War, designed to control every single aspect of our lives, how we make money, how we heal our bodies, and even how we think. Ultimately, this whole massive document really boils down to this one powerful question it leaves you with. It challenges all of us to look at the patterns it lays out and decide for ourselves, is history just a bunch of random accidents, or is it the execution of a plan? That's a heavy question, and it's exactly where this document wants your mind to be.